I've spoken to you before about something that's really important if you want to do a big fight, is that you don't manipulate the rules. I spoke to you about that, and I've had a lot of people go, oh, yeah, but that'd be great. I would love to see an MMA guy versus a boxer, but with small gloves. If I could see Conor versus Floyd again, but we put him in 4-ounce gloves, I would really like that. I don't disagree. I don't have to attempt to tell you that you're wrong and that you wouldn't like that. But you're missing a colossally large point, okay? If you're going to have a big fight, you're going to put up a bunch of money and you're going to have a spectacle and you're going to let it all ride. I mean, one of these, I'm talking about a big fight. If you're going to do something like this, and boy, there's some great stories on that. Dave Feldman and Bare Knuckle, just to use one that just happened a year ago, had to refinance his house to keep the lights on at Bare Knuckle. He goes out to Colorado. He packs the place. It's insane. This was the Mike Perry, Luke Rockhold night. All of a sudden, Conor McGregor shows up. All of a sudden, not only does he have this wonderful piece of business, but he had a wonderful advertisement and marketing that went well into the future. He got all of his money back. Vince McMahon wanted to do something called WrestleMania, and he did not have the money. And he had to go to loan sharks. He had to make deals with guys that he could not cover the spread. Every dollar that Vince had spent, every dollar that he had promised out that he was going to pay, from the cameramans to the wrestlers themselves, it was all on the come line. He needed something to work, and it was something that had never been done. And it was a pay-per-view event. Pay-per-view. The term that people hadn't heard. They thought he was saying paper, like, you'd write on paper. Pay-per-view. They didn't even know what it meant. It was something called pay-per-view. And so it was going to go in movie theaters. Put this in movie theaters, you're going to buy it just like a ticket, and you're going to go out and watch it. There was a massive education process that was have to go on within the public sphere. But I've shared with you, like, some of these really great ones, the big ones that change lives and create industries. When you're having something really big, really special, you will not get anywhere without the media. There is not a campaign that's ran and won on any meaningful level. State, federal, House, Senate, presidency. Without the media. And people will so often tell me that the most important part of the fight, and the fighters should be paid more. None of this happens without the fighters. Like, you're never going to do away with that debate. And if you're involved in it and you're a leader, you're going to back that false narrative until you're blue in the face. Until you're blue in the face, you are always going to build your principles within your fighters. You're going to say, this is the most important thing. This doesn't happen, and they deserve and get all the credit. But it's not true. Period. Would not matter how good a fighter was. Would not matter. Would not matter if he was touched by the hand of God and his skills were divine. It would not matter if the camera didn't capture it. So now we figured out, just with that one example, we've now understood, well, okay, I guess the fighter isn't the most important thing. Capturing him on camera is the most important thing, and then distributing it around the world and building okay, great. But as long as we can kind of start to see and understand, then I can get you to understand that when you have a press release, when you have a media day, when you have a press conference, it's completely incumbent that what you say and announce is brought in, absorbed, and appreciated by the media. Now, that's a very hard thing to do, and it's a very rare thing in the competitiveness of sport that the big dogs that are going to make you or break you like what you have to say. The barriers of entry and the rejection that you will face for years until all of a sudden they see it your way. It's very hard. We've seen this in football. There was something called XFL, but it wouldn't matter the examples you gave. One of the reasons they could never get over on the NFL is they just didn't have the media. Why would the media cover the XFL, which is a second or third rate brand or something that's trying to get up and going, when they're in the ratings business and they can talk about the NFL, which everybody knows it's not a risk. There's no education process. There's only so much time in the sports show. So you're going to turn to what's best. You're going to turn to what's hottest. Not some of the time. You're going to do that every single time. But it's important that you understand this formula. You have to have the media. And while it's nice to say it's, oh no, the fighters are the two most important things, let me just give you an example. Ngannou and Fury did not have a lot of media. And I know people have attempted to rewrite the story and say it's because they didn't know. Nobody in the world didn't know how competitive Francis could be. You're not wrong about that. Like, that is a piece. But when you state it as though that's the only piece, if your statement were true, then we would fully understand that the rematch between Ngannou and Fury, stop the presses, halt everything, go and get that, because we now know how competitive it would be. One of the reasons the media didn't cover it, and in fact it was the absolute top reason, is the media didn't know how to explain to the audience what it was these two were going to do. The media, let me use SportsCenter. They're going to cover all your sports, and they're going to start with the top, right? You got your baseball, basketball, football, of course. They'll touch on a little tennis and they'll touch on a little golf. They'll even touch on a little bit of cornhole here and there. But if you go out and you create a sport, you make it up, it doesn't fall into the definition of what the world knows to be sport. Wouldn't matter if it's badminton, cricket, volleyball, any way that you want to do it, if you create something that is not one of those, if you do not have sanctioning by the appropriate bodies of the recognized sports, you're not going to get on SportsCenter. You can't. Let me stop you right there. You're not going to get onto SportsCenter. I don't have to go further, and I don't have to say, well, what if it's Zuckerberg versus Musk? No, you don't have to offer me anything. You don't have to get creative. You don't have to do anything. You don't fall into a category of a sport and you don't have the sanctioning of an approved body, you're not going to get on SportsCenter. It's a big deal. One of the biggest busts for Francis and Fury is that those two, while trying to get somebody to open up the purse strings, told and sold the idea that they were going to make up a sport. And it was very harmful. It was harmful because the media can't explain that. You can't break in and say Tyson Fury and Francis Ngannou are getting ready to blah, 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 blah. It doesn't work that way. You have to say what they're getting ready to do. They're getting ready to play soccer. They're getting ready to play bridge. They're getting ready to play fill in the blank. Not a name of which would be created, because if you change one rule, you change the sport. You play football under football exactly as you know, but you make it 3/4, you're now doing something else. That's not how football is played. If you play basketball, it's the exact same thing, but a bucket is worth 5 points. You're now playing something else. You're not playing that. Very important that you do understand, because if you come out and one of the things that happened with Ngannou and Fury, those guys spent so much time, right? They had nothing there. They had no promoter that wanted that. And they wanted it, though. They really wanted to do it. So they start telling the story. They start telling it a little bit better. And they start adding things to it. I mean, Fury went so far one time, they're going to do it. I think it was no gloves, and it was going to be in a cage. It was going to be boxing. Mike Tyson was going to be the referee. I mean, they just kept going as a way of trying to sweeten the pot. But it was a pot that they didn't understand what was needed. They didn't understand they have to have the media telling the story, backing them up, convincing people it's cool, telling people when it is. That's a major thing you count on the media for. A major thing. To tell and remind the people that's this weekend. It starts at 2 o'clock Eastern time. It's something you count on them for, and they can't do any of those things. A sports show is not going to cover a non-sport. I feel I've made my point. It's a big deal when you're talking about Deontay Wilder versus Francis Ngannou. You have both are boxers now, right? You can officially say that both are boxers. How in box? Or both are MMA guy now. Right now, we've never seen historically a financial win here. Whether we took MMA and moved it to boxing, or we took boxing and we moved it to MMA, we've never seen a financial win, but we have seen a spectacle. We have seen things that will still perk your interest. So if there's talk of Deontay and Francis, and you understand what is absolute key, which is the media. It's not the fighters. It's not the purses. It's none of those things. It's the media. They get behind you and they back you, or they don't. You'll start to understand how important it is that you pick a sport, but you'll also start to understand why. And if you understand that you must have the ingredient that one of them falls, one of them must fall. And you understand the ingredient that one of them must rise. I'm not talking about a fight. I'm not talking about an undercard fight. I'm not talking about a Saturday in your hometown. I'm talking about the mega and massive fights will always have those ingredients. If a guy is coming in on what's called a one-off, where you're going to get him one time and he rides off and he goes somewhere else and goes and does whatever it is he has to do, then you have no ability to cause the rise or to cause the fall, which means you remove it from possible ingredients, which means you would eliminate it from being a big fight.